to have a great take and the engineers say, guys, we have to do it again. I didn't get it a hot enough level on the kick drum. I just think we got to get our priorities straight here. Is it about the performance or is it about the level on the kick drum? If the kick drum mic wasn't on, that still was a good take. We'll figure it out somehow. We'll drop in a sample and line it up, frame by frame. I mean, we're going to do this.
Welcome to Recording Studio Rockstars. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is the podcast created to help you become a rock star of the recording studio. This episode is sponsored by SonarWorks, helping you get the most out of your mixes by correcting the sound of the speakers and headphones in your studio so you get your mix right the first time. Are you sick of doing multiple mixes and still you can't get the low end right? How would it feel to have badass bass the first time? Get a 21-day free trial at sonarworks.com. Are you ready to rock the perfect mix? This episode is sponsored by OWC, Other World Computing, which you can find at OWC.com, your trusted source for memory and speed upgrades, DIY installs, and used Macs for your studio. Let OWC focus on keeping your studio Mac in killer condition so that you can focus on making great music. Why ditch your existing Mac when you can take your studio far into the future with OWC? Learn more at OWC.com and learn how you can supercharge your studio Mac. The speed to create, the capacity to dream. Find out how awesome your Mac can be at OWC. Hey Rockstars, it's Lid Shaw and welcome back to Recording Studio Rockstars, bringing you into the studio to learn from recording professionals so that you can make your best record ever and be a rock star of the studio yourself. My guest today is Tim Lauer, a Nashville-based composer, producer, songwriter, and musician. He recently completed his second season as executive music producer for the television show Nashville, following T-Bone Burnett and Buddy Miller, who previously held the position. He produced over 125 cast recordings for the Nashville show and was also EMP for the Greenleaf Season 1 and wrote and produced the main title song performed by Mavis Staples. Tim is an Emmy-nominated writer whose songs have been featured in advertisements for BMW, Target, Coke, Microsoft, and many others, as well as TV shows, One Tree Hill, Drop Dead Diva, Hung, The White Queen, Homeland, Teen Wolf, and Pretty Little Liars and Cougar Town. He has played on over 300 major label albums, recording with a wide variety of artists, including Robert Plant, Taylor Swift, The Civil Wars, Chris Cornell, Keith Urban, Rodney Crowell, many others. He has arranged strings for Skillet, Blake Shelton, Francesca Battistelli, and many others, in addition to scoring short films and podcasts. Oh, cool. Podcast. I forgot. I looked glazed over that on first read too. And orchestrating for respected German director Wim Wenders. Is that how he says it?
Wim Wenders.
Wim Wenders. He's produced Mickey Echo, Kate Vogel, John Oates, and Buck Owens. You can also hear him on Guitar Hero and Wii Games. Today, we're going to talk about how Tim got to where he is today in music, the life of a session musician, and what it's like to compose and produce music for a hit TV show. Please welcome Tim Lauer to Recording Studio Rockstars. Tim.
Hello.
Are you ready to rock, dude?
I am so ready to rock.
Nice, man. How does it feel to hear your bio read back to you?
Well, it's interesting because, it's all true, but it's all over a long period of time.
Yeah.
So when I can hear that and say, man, wow. And then I think, but there were a lot of times and it didn't feel like I was exactly killing it. That makes sense.
Yeah, right. When you're making music for long enough, you start to look back on it and you realize there's a remarkable amount of work that you created, a body of work.
And I tell, young guys and assistant engineers and stuff, keep track of what you work on, because if you set up one mic on the such and such record, it's on your credits, and it kind of people look at that stuff.
Yeah,
and,
definitely.
So
there's definitely a lot
keep
of
track.
that,
Yeah.
right? How do you keep track these days? What are some?
I say keep track because I haven't done a great job.
Right.
I sometimes just look at Artist Direct or AllMusic or albumcredits.com or something. So I haven't. I have a little kind of a running list on syncs and licenses, but I've kind of gotten bad about that too.
I feel like one of the challenges with keeping track of credits is you might work on something and not until much later does it have a final proper name. Is it actually released? Do you have anywhere to find it? Do you know who else was on it?
Yeah. And then sometimes, well, a lot of times the coolest stuff you can't trace. The stuff you're most proud of maybe doesn't make it on Spotify or have credits out there. And, so I'm sure some of it's wrong. Some of it, my name gets spelled wrong. And it goes, there's an Laur, Tim Lauer, that there's a handful of things on. And, it's nice to know what you did, but at the end of the day, you just got to keep doing it. So,
Yeah, hopefully it's the process, not the product that motivates you to do it. But, for me, an example is I had produced a song for the band Living Things that became the soundtrack for a singular commercial in like the 2005 Super Bowl commercial. Mm-hmm. So that's like, I can confidently say I've produced music that's been heard by 50 million people at once or whatever, but I can't find it on the internet anywhere.
Yeah.
So, all right, well, cool. Good tip. Let us know more about who you are and how you started out in music. Give us the kind of the condensed version of how you got to where you are today in recording.
The condensed version is just totally eaten up with it as a kid. Started playing instruments as a kid in band. Junior high and high school, I played a different instrument every year just to keep it fun.
I was going to say, I don't think we really mentioned what your instrument was.
Well, it's primarily keyboards that other people hire me for. But, I grew up playing drums. I wanted to be a studio drummer. I played percussion in the orchestra in college. I play guitar. I write on guitar. I play bass and I know the fingerings to a lot of instruments, even if I don't have the lip together to play a trumpet or trombone or baritone or tuba or sax, whatever. I know the fingerings. That doesn't help, but it just means I'm geeky enough to have.
That's more fingerings than I know.
I had a paper out in northern Wisconsin. Nobody else was into music. Nobody else into recording, synthesis. So I had a paper out, freezing cold, early morning paper out. And I saved my money, and there was a music store an hour away, and I'd get my eye on a TX 4-track recorder or Tascam Porta Studio or whatever there was, and buy some mics from a polka band that had their own gear.
You did say northern Wisconsin.
Yeah, I had a drum set in my room and a bass, and I had all the early Roland synths, the Juno 6 no presets, so I'd make the sounds, and this Juno 60 and the 106 and all that stuff, and Radio Shack, Moog ripoff.
Oh
things.
Yeah, the realistic Moogs, those were great. Remember the sound machines too? They just had like sound effects generators.
Right, it was and no pitch control thing. Yeah. And so then I started I put headphones on, played drums along with records. And then I started, I'm going to play the drums, and I'm going to play the bass, and I'm going to play the guitar, and I'm going to play the piano. And then it's like, wait a second, I'm out of tracks. What if I did 3 things? Then I put it all I was learning about like bouncing down to tracks and opening up other ones before
Did somebody teach you about bouncing
No,
tracks?
I just got up to a wall where I think, boy, it'd sure be great. Now I could put a vocal on here if I had any tracks left. So I kind of figured that out. We also had a band director that had Musician Magazine in the band room.
Ah, cool.
And there were all these really cool black and white grainy photos of people in studios, with white Koss headphones with curly cords. And
Koss, another company from up in Wisconsin, I think.
Yeah. Or are they Scandinavian? I don't know. Anyway,
I feel like I see that when I drive by Milwaukee.
But I also I had hi-fi gear like Harman Kardon amp, and I would get the really good turntable and the cleaner, and then be very careful with my, audiophile records and sit there and listen in headphones and, on a beanbag chair, up in the North Woods. And so I was into that. And then I decided I wanted to be a string arranger and film composer. So I moved to Belmont, did that whole thing. I had sold my drum set because I didn't have room in my car. And then I didn't want to get a job. I mean, who wants to get a job? So I started playing piano for voice lessons. Nice. And just learning like jazz songs and rock songs and country songs where I had to figure out how to accompany a singer, different styles, transpose on the spot. And then I started getting a little work as a musician. Friends of Trisha Yearwood, she got a record deal, went out and toured with her. And
wait, were you in Nashville already at this point, or were you?
Yeah, I moved to Nashville when I was 17 when I started college.
Cool.
And I just got some road gigs, other various country artists and Christian contemporary artists, and eventually got a songwriting deal. As soon as you get a writing deal, you have to do demos, or you get to do demos. So this was the big reward, is that my wife had a deal, I had a deal. It was at Sony Tree. They had plenty of money. And whenever we wanted to record songs, we just recorded them.
Wow, so that makes it kind of fun. You're just like,
it was incredible.
Let's go record.
So if there was a studio that I wanted to work in, I just booked that studio. And if there was a musician I really loved and respected and never had worked with before, I just hire that musician.
That's cool.
So, and it was tracking to 2-inch tape, but I had ADATs. So I'd go from ADATs. Well, first of all, I had a 4-track cassette machine that we did like our work demos on at home. So we had a little home thing with probably like a little Boss drum machine, and then like guitar, and then maybe a Wurlitzer or some kind of just chords, beat, vocal at home on the cassette 4-track. That's how we did our like work tape demos. And but then I learned that ADATs broke really, really often. So I had 5 ADATs, and with 5 ADATs, I could keep 3 working.
You see, I got one down on the bottom shelf there still.
Yeah. Well, I had the blackface. I had the early ones.
I remember those.
And I had a Mackie 1604 mixer. But I had 3 ADATs, so I had the 2 of them and a mixer. And then I think I had an Alesis 3630 compressor. So I had 2 channels of compressor. Got one of those down there too. Or is it called a 3630?
Yeah, 3630.
And then I had the EQ also. But I would just say, well, I got 2 channels of EQ, so I can either do the vocal and the snare or the, you know what I mean? It was, can you imagine?
Hey, vocals and snare, if you get those right in Nashville, you're,
Yeah. And then I'd have a really, wide dynamic range. And then I started going to Jim DeMaine, and he would master the demos. And they actually came out. They sounded pretty great. And he had a little crow. He had the
loft.
Way up there. You climb up the spiral staircase. And he was mastering on a, what did you call it? The single space finalizer.
Finalizer, yeah.
And he would just fly around. And Mike Haynes, the trumpet player, also was mastering on that. That was the only thing. And they would just fly around on that thing.
I can't even remember who made the finalizer.
TC Electronics.
It was TC Electronics.
And I ended up buying one of those, and that helped me a ton. And then I got into I guess I had a Yamaha endorsement as a player. And what was I had the O2R, but before there was like the O3D or something like that. It was like a smaller desktop digital console with automation and built-in plugins. So
it was pretty amazing, the O2R, when it came out, that it could do so much. But boy, I remember once I learned how to use it, one day I realized, I was like, holy shit, every time I want to do something, I have to do a perfectly orchestrated 5 moves. It was really hard.
But it had the 2 modes. It had the 2 modes, right? Like you could, and this would really tripped me out, and I hated this about Pro Tools, where you could do a bunch of vocal rides, and then if you wanted to just take that one line and keep the rides in place, but bump the line.
Yeah, like a trim mode.
Yeah, I think that's what they call it. And I just couldn't believe that you couldn't do that with Pro Tools after I got Pro Tools.
Because the O2R would do it. Yeah, it's funny how there are so many things that we take for granted.
The Compander and the O2R, I love that.
We were dreaming of back then.
Yeah. So then I had that, and then I'm kind of doing my gear progression because I think this is a little more studio and engineer oriented.
True. Yeah. We can go through it kind of quickly if you want.
But just tell me if you want it on the more musical side of things. But on the gear thing, so then I had the O2R, I had the O3D, and then I graduated to the O2R, and it was Yamaha, so I had NS10s and stuff from them, and then I did the Tascam 2424, the digital guy. And I could fly on that stuff. I mean, I could, like you copy and paste and fly stuff in. So I did that with backup vocals and all that.
Maybe part of a takeaway from hearing this story too is just the reminder that it's okay if you're going to, go from one format to another. Like Pro Tools has been around for a minute, but even as Pro Tools, it's been like a variety of versions of it. And I think about
like there might be a time when it's like, remember Pro Tools? Like, oh yeah, I had Pro Tools. Probably.
You remember stereo? Oh yeah, I remember you moved the two speakers.
Sure,
I remember that.
Yeah. But I did have a little format thing where I had those trunkfuls of VHS tapes for the ADATs.
Yeah, totally.
Because I would have the tape A, B, and C, and then the backup of tape. So every 6
master slave.
And then I did Trevan tapes for the 2424.
Well, so let's jump forward a little bit to your musicianship too.
Yeah.
Well, first off, you have a studio now. Tell us about the studio that you've got now that you work out of.
So my studio now is not very big. It's 2 rooms. I live on a street that has several other studios. I can walk to Blackbird. I can walk to any of the House of Blues rooms.
Yeah.
I can walk to Paul Moak's. Brown Owl is 2 doors down. Jeff is across the street.
And you're right in Berry Hill.
Electric Thunder. So my studio is a place where I keep instruments that I want to grab. And so that's a little bit of percussion, some guitars, a bass, drums that don't stay up to set up, variety of keyboards. And then it's mainly for overdubs and mixing. I've cut strings in there a ton because there's a tall ceiling, but I don't really do that anymore because even that is more set up than I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
So I figure for the amount of effort, time, money to get into like tracking even a couple of things, I'd rather just go to one of my friend's place and pay a reasonable rate and leave.
Yeah.
So it's a couple of rooms, Pro Tools with an Apollo, and a lunchbox with various things. Not a whole lot, but I try to have 3 or 4 different preamps, a couple of EQs.
Well, you kind of have an advantage in a way because when you determine that you only need a few of something for a studio, it lets you really concentrate your effort into having, potentially a really nice mic and a nice preamp and whatever you're using,
And yes, but I mean, I had the advantage of being in Nashville. For $15, I can go rent. I mean, the nicest.
Yeah.
$25, whatever. I can.
From Blackbird, which Rockstars, I'm pretty sure Blackbird will ship rentals as well. So no matter where you are in the US, for sure, I think it's worth going to the Blackbird rental website and take a look. You may be able to rent just about any piece of gear and use it on your session.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing when you think about what you pay to just fix a mic, So I've always liked personality gear. And a lot of times to me, personality gear is cheap, unusual, something that other people aren't using. And just having that gives you some kind of individuality, I think.
Yeah.
So as far as like the basic food group kind of stuff, I'd rather borrow, rent,
Well, so your studio, what role do you play in your studio these days? Are you composing and writing and then gathering musicians and people to get together to go into another studio to record it?
Well, the interesting thing about my music life in Nashville has been that it's so many different things. So, for instance, when I was doing, and I did a show called Greenleaf before Nashville, and this is full tracking. There's a lot of specific. I mean, the audio has to be a certain way for TV, and usually a lot of people involved. And we had a budget, so it's like, let's just go to Blackbird. Let's go to Sound Emporium.
Yeah.
Let's,
What does that mean when you say the audio has to be a certain way for TV? What do you have in mind?
Well, look, when I'm at my place, if I decide I want to mic a drum set with one mic that I bought at a garage sale on Saturday and just go, I'm going to commit to this and blow it up with the distressor or something like, then it's like, hey, it's my world, my life. That's how it's going to be. And you just do it. If I want to record an acoustic guitar, in mono with an SM7, I just do it. In the TV show, we never knew how things were going to be used. So we had a lot of backup stuff. So you might have a close mic on an acoustic guitar, then you would have a stereo pair a little farther back and a shotgun mic, because what if the scene, somebody ends up, it's writing in the bedroom. And now it sounds like a record, but it should sound like it's in the room. Same thing with the drums. You're generally going to compress drums. Well, what if now it becomes an arena gig? 6 episodes later, they say, hey, we're going to use that song, but he's doing it at the CMA Awards in this scene. And you want just raw audio, really, open options. Yeah. So there were a lot of extra tracks. The vocals we always did with 58 or SM7, and then some sort of hi-fi large diaphragm mic plus a shotgun. Yeah. So we always had 3 tracks of vocals. There's little to no compression. So, it's different.
Leaving room for manipulation later.
Yeah. So different than making a record. And we had cast people in and people that would show up from, line skater from the set or whatever. So I just I want to go to a place that has a lounge, place for people to be. They clean it every day, and I had the luxury of being able to do that. So my place during all that was used for archiving, labeling, comping, editing.
Take the stuff back after you record it.
Pre-mixing, mixing, overdubs with me, overdubs with a friend that nobody else was coming to attend, And so I never had cast over there. It was just kind of like my little retreat place. And that was often going while I was somewhere else. Yeah. So I would have guys working on that kind of stuff. Well,
that's fascinating. So how many tracks might you end up with in a production of a song that, might be a 4-piece, 5-piece band arrangement?
Well, I mean, there'd be a lot of tracks of drums. I don't know track count, but we often would get a DI bass and put in an amp bass, and then maybe a little farther back. I mean, we kind of would always cover the bass.
It's called the what if mics.
Yeah, and it's amazing how many times that became very important and valuable. Yeah, I don't know. And it was all different. I mean, a lot of times the song would be presented in the show as like 3 people in a club, but then there's an iTunes version. So now there's 4 more guitar parts and a mellotron part and background vocals and a tambourine and totally different drum kit, because in the scene, it's going to be a guy playing a djembe and a shaker. So, there was not only were there versions and iterations in the scene, but then there would be the iTunes record version that was different.
Same vocal or different vocals?
Same vocal. Mm-hmm.
So it's just the more fleshed out produced version for iTunes.
Stuff that works. You'd be amazed what you can get away with. Not get away with. You'll be amazed at how you perceive the music differently with and without picture.
Yeah, no, I realized that some of the first times I experimented with video and music, I realized that a really crappy sounding recording that I might have done seemed to make a whole lot more sense if there was a picture to make sense of it with your brain. You know?
once I'm mixing something that was a live recording done in the prison. And, the best way to make that sound good is to turn up those room mics, and you get people coughing and air conditioning and all this stuff. And all of a sudden you look at it and you go, man, that's so believable.
That's fascinating.
But if you turn the picture off, Apple 9, and all of a sudden it's really noisy and weird, and we should have done this and that,
So Apple 9. So we're talking about Pro Tools.
Pro Tools, video and Pro Tools. Yeah.
So video and Pro Tools, and that's a big part of how you might be working during the day, where you're composing music and seeing the video the whole time.
Yeah, and as far as composing, I do now on Nashville and Greenleaf. I'm talking about live scene music. So I wasn't necessarily doing post score, but I do a lot of ad work, and a lot of that is to picture. So I might write to picture, certainly record to picture, and absolutely, definitely mix to picture. But even just getting a guitar sound, I want to see picture.
It's something that I'm just not used to, because I'm typically recording, single songs by themselves. But here and there I've done it, and it is pretty fun. It's like having something to inform you.
Yeah, and on an ad, I'm not even talking about trying to make it sound like it's coming from the space, but it's just like, man, he's driving down an open road. It's big, expansive. I thought that was too much spring reverb of the amp, but it's not at all. Crank that puppy up, and I thought it needed to be compressed, but it kind of doesn't, and then a lot of times most of the time, I also have the audio. So say it's something like there was a Coke ad with like explosions and a plane driving by and a truck. And so I got to be sensitive to the frequency that the bass and the kick drum are taking up. And then I'm talking like the EQ or the busyness and the hi-hat with the sibilance of the voiceover. So not only do I want to do picture, but I want to look at the picture with their audio, always remembering that visual wins every time. And then their voiceover is the second most important thing. And so, they're not going to change the diction on the voiceover because they love my hi-hat pattern.
Have you tried that? Listen, guys, I'm really proud of this hi-hat. I was just wondering if maybe...
Right. I tell you what I do is I will... Sometimes the stuff they send is placeholder or just not, or it's the final and it's not very well recorded. And when I submit my video with the music, I will spend sometimes a good bit of effort on their audio, clip gain, P-pops.
Oh, really? Cleaning it up so that you're getting multi-track of the dialogue and stuff like that.
Yeah,
too.
and then I also no. I just a 2-track. I'll just go into the 2-track and mess around with, EQing this one bar. These 2 seconds. I'll EQ the VO voiceover because of what's happening in the music. It's all an attempt for them to love the music.
Right, totally.
And I oftentimes do several options. Like here's 5 versions of totally different music, and I work on their audio individually, because my different music is maybe there's a lot more bottom that you can have in the voice on this one version than the next, because that was a ukulele, now it's a cello. So
in the end, you really want to just sell them on whatever version they're choosing.
Right. And then I'm going to send them stems anyway, and their people hopefully will do a good job and mix it. But I feel like I have to help the situation a bit.
So now when you're writing the music itself, what does it look like for you? Somebody hands you you've got a bit of video, and it's just image and voices, and you're trying to imagine the music.
There's a brief usually, and it'll say something like, we love the energy. Oftentimes they reference something that they just can't afford. Right. So we love the energy of this Imagine Dragons song, but it's a little too slow. We like the guitar sound on this song, and then it's also something they can't afford, or they haven't found. It's not even about the money. It's not right. We're like elements of it, and then or I could say client wants it to be very simple. Like technology ads often want imperfections in the music.
Interesting.
So not too hi-fi. not too virtuoso in the playing. We like a lot of noises, no click. So
You said technology heads. Is that what you said?
Technology ads.
Technology
so
ads.
when people are
see.
selling, telephones and cable service or investment products, software.
That's why we hear so many ukuleles.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's the happy, clappy kind of thing. But I'm talking more of like the emotional. They want emotion, and they want a little bit rougher on the edges to sort of temper the fact that they're, it's an Exxon commercial and there's people with lab coats pouring things into, test tubes.
Yeah.
And so then they kind of...
It's the contrast that makes it work.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, where do you see the opposite of that? Do you see, kids stomping in the mud on a playground and they want you to deliver the next Mouse track?
No, they want ukulele.
They want ukulele.
No, that is, I mean, look, the thing about the ukulele and the ad thing is no different from playing on pop music or records. I mean, like there are trends that hang around for a very, very long time.
I'm going to give us a ukulele break right now. Maybe you can do the ukulele, but it goes.
Right. The whistles, hand claps, snaps. Yeah.
There you go. That's our happy interlude for the podcast.
I mean, you truly, you could do 50 of those and put them in a music library and, pay a few light bills,
Cool, man.
Okay. In answer to the question of the studio. So in that situation, I have a very small demo budget, which usually just covers a couple musicians or an engineer helper for me. So in that case, my studio is the tracking room, and I don't have a budget for cartage. And, so that becomes, that's where it all happens, And then if I'm doing an artist project or something, we might track somewhere and, even do vocals somewhere else and then come back for some keyboard overdubs and some checking out comps and closing out mixes and use my studio for that.
Yeah.
So,
and so are you mixing in your studio a lot of the time?
Yeah.
What does that look like for you? How do you mix? Are you all in the box? With
all in
Pro
the
Tools?
box. It's,
have you arrived at certain templates that sort of, this is the way you're usually going to approach it?
I have zero. I've never done templates. I've had all kinds of synths and I don't save sounds.
Interesting. So you'll look for the
I've
sound
never
you want.
saved sounds. And then my session rig for a long time was still is, but I don't do as much of it anymore. But I had a patch bay and stomp boxes, and things were sort of molted out and clean and dirty, and delay on the distortion only and all those kinds of things. And as soon as I was done with that sound, yank, pull the chords, set everything, it's like, it's the last time you'll ever get that sound. It was fun for me. I think people liked it. There was a bit of a mad scientist aspect to it that I think people were drawn to. Plus I had a lot of parameters that I could move at the same time. So that's that about the no preset thing. In mixing, my style, the genre and style of music is so all over the map. I can imagine maybe having a template for somebody's EP that's kind of similar band, but I probably have a mental starting default template thing, but I never pull a session up that already has plugins and routings and stuff like that.
Okay. All right. Well, that's interesting stuff to know. Your sessions that you're working with, though, they could be a lot of tracks because you might have sound effects and dialogue and music, or is that, are you just focused on music and the 2-track that they send you?
If I'm doing that, there's only a couple tracks of audio.
Okay.
Yeah.
What do I want to ask you about? What about levels? I feel like in the world of film and TV, there's a very different approach to the target level you're going for in your mix versus what we're used to in music, just making stuff, maxing it out and filling up all the space.
Yeah, no, getting used to the dynamic range, which can be pretty wildly broad. We used to, for the shows, we'd do a playback, and so Mike Poole, the chief engineer guy he lives here, and a couple of us would go in and make notes. And I had to get used to sibilants and dialogue, because my ear would just be like, get that out of there, put a de-esser on it, and I realized that for TV, people are doing their email, and they're emptying their dishwasher, and they're running back to the fridge for Cheetos, and they got bad acoustics in their room, and there's a lot more S's and stuff.
Like you need more of that informative detail.
Yeah. That's from the dialogue side of things. From the music side of thing, it's usually just don't get too committed, because you never know how we're going to have to change this.
Right. Yeah.
Which I get, and I understand that's part of being professional in that area, but I also love when I can just commit to something in another situation. So I have no always and no nevers, and that's probably my biggest pet peeve in the studio. Somebody says, "Well, I always mic a B3 with 3 mics," and as soon as they say "always," I'm just like, I don't know about you anymore. I mean, like, what if you want?
I always try not to do the same thing more than once. Right.
But like, really, like, I have to have an RE20 on the bottom. Really, you have to. What if I told you you could use, one garage cell mic 10 feet away, and it might just be awesome.
Yeah.
So that's why there's no templates for me. That's I try to just be pretty invisible, as far as like sonic stamp or point of view. It's very material driven, vocal.
So you're I want to say you're a good listener. You're a good watcher.
Yeah.
You're watching what's going on and making sure that you're responding appropriately.
And a lot of that, I think that wiring came through being a session player.
Well,
so
cool.
As a session musician, you have to come in and at the drop of a hat change style, sound. You could be playing, old school country piano, and the next moment you're doing EDM stuff, and then the next moment you're playing, Muscle Shoals B3 kind of stuff, and then so you just have to be ready. And yeah. I always got kind of and still do when the band changes, everybody changes, instruments, approach, point of view, parts, and the engineer is just sitting in there, arms folded, not adjusting. And I hear the headphones and I go, nothing changed. It's like, why would you not say, man, I should use a different mic in this acoustic. And I'm gonna change my mic placement on the piano. And you changed snare drums. I should come out here and see what's going on. It's like, why is the audio side of things not also adjusting? So I do that very much as an engineer, is have a different master fader for something I want to put in a different kind of era or a different kind of feeling, And as a session player, you get used to not necessarily saying, this is what I do, let me superimpose my thing on your thing. They tell you this is what we want. And then you say, okay, well, let me try to figure out how to get there. And that's how I do audio too.
Well, let's take a break for just a minute, and Rockstars will come back in for the jam session and talk more about session musicianship with Tim. A reminder before we break, you can find links to what we're talking about in the show notes. I've got a YouTube playlist of some of Tim's work. You can go check out what he's creating there. And you can find that right in the show notes on your mobile device, or just go to rsrockstars.com and you'll find the blog post there as well. See you guys in just a minute for the jam session. You have already invested in your studio speakers, headphones, and treatment of the room. And you're passionate about creating great music, but your mixes don't seem to translate to the rest of the world. The reason is that your speakers and headphones are not telling you the whole story. The frequency response of your studio has huge peaks and valleys all throughout the low end that are completely screwing up your perspective. You may be doing your best to hit the bullseye with your mix, but your room makes the target of a perfect mix impossible to find. Wouldn't it feel great if there was a simple tool that could fix all that for you and help you get your mixes right the first time? Introducing SonarWorks Reference 4, the affordable solution to correcting your speakers and headphones in your studio. Built for Windows and Mac, SonarWorks helps you position your speakers, correct your control room imperfections, and get $1 million sound on a home studio budget. Get a 21-day free trial at sonarworks.com and start your journey toward the perfect mix. Are you using a Mac in your recording studio? Are you tired of feeling like the studio setup you worked so hard to create is becoming obsolete too quickly? Wouldn't it feel great to have a trusted friend to help you keep your existing Mac and studio setup current and relevant so that you can focus on the thing you love most, which is making great music? Well, now you can rely on OWC, Other World Computing, which you can find at OWC.com, whose mission it is to help you get the most mileage out of your existing Mac. Whether you need to upgrade your RAM, install an SSD drive, add more connectivity, or simply find a great used Mac that's ready to rock, OWC will help take your studio into the future with a vast library of DIY install videos, 24/7 friendly support, and free shipping in the US on most items over $49. Why get frustrated and ditch your existing computer when you can take your studio into the future with OWC? Learn more at OWC.com and find out how awesome your Mac can be at OWC. Hey, rock stars, we're back now for the jam session. My guest today is Tim Lauer, joining us to talk about producing music for television, writing and recording, being a session musician here in Nashville. You ready to jam, Tim?
Jam away.
All right.
Count it off.
So let's see. What was I going to say? One of the things I forgot to ask you in the first part of this was to share an inspirational quote, something to get us excited about hitting the studio.
Well, I went to music school. Nobody has ever asked if I had a degree or cared. I got a lot of things out of school, but the thing that has stuck with me is one of my music history teachers said one day, every piece of music that has stood the test of time has had tension and repose. And that's rock and roll. Small verse, big chorus. And so that's something that I use all the time. So tension and repose I might apply to playing a solo where you just strike out a bunch of notes and you just hang on one. Tension and repose might be the build, the dynamic build of sections. Tension and repose, you get a lot of tension from really compressing something. And then what if you mix it in with something that's not compressed at all? And you get that gives it excitement, something that's super, super tight, and then something that's kind of loose and wanky, something that's very played softly and very reverberant, and then something that's overdriven and in your face and dry, So tension and repose is that thing that I'm always thinking about. Same with the vocal. I mean, don't whisper all of it, and don't hit me full voice all of it. Let's give me a little.
Right. It's like the reference you made to the technology ads, wanting that contrast
right.
With music.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's cool. And I think that goes to storytelling. I think it goes into art. It goes into music. Yeah. It's part of what makes it's life, right? Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's a life lesson. Well, now, do you have any stories you want to share, fun stories about anything gone a little bit awry for you in the studio when you were a session musician? I imagine you must have had some sessions where you were asked to do some very difficult things.
Well, I mean, look, there's some of the most uncomfortable sessions. I was often called in as a keyboard player with bands. So here's the band, and I'm the only one that's not in the band because they're a young rock band or whatever. And oftentimes, you'd see the drummer get fired from the session,
We just talked about that,
which
on the
is
last
always
episode.
heartbreaking and awkward, but I've had to go in and tell producers, hey, are you listening to the click in here? Because it's one thing to time correct these drums, but dude is actually so off that there are added 4 bars, and it's like it's going over. And I don't know what to do because I can't play a second pass because it's not even, the beats aren't even lining up, because that kind of stuff.
That's a tough spot to be in if you're the keyboardist called in for the session to try and share that with the producer.
So you have to balance, do I just keep my mouth shut, or sometimes I've had to text them, how much time correction are you going to do? Because maybe I'm playing the piano, which is not an easy instrument to edit with all the overtones. And they'll say, oh no, dude, we're going to totally. So, okay, great. And then, so I just turn the drums off and play the click, which is very unmusical.
Right.
But I know where their end result. I mean, their freaking drummer is unmusical.
Right.
So they're,
well, we were joking about that with Vance. It's like you never hear stories about the mandolin player getting fired from the session,
Right.
But I mean, it's because the drums and the rhythm section, it's the backbone of.
There's hardly been a hit song that didn't have a great drum track. I mean, try to name one.
And also, with so much multi-track building of music these days, if you don't start with a solid foundation, finish the analogy, the metaphor for me. But
yeah, right. You're screwed.
Yeah, you're screwed. That was it.
Yeah, that's the metaphor. There's also a lot of pre-pro that comes in these days. So you think, well, you brought all this programming in. How loud is it going to be? And then you got to figure out what do I play to? Some bass players pride themselves on, getting real tight with the drummer. It's like, well, great, but you just made more work for the editor.
Right. If the drums are really off. Well, so was that sort of the story about awkward situations as a keyboardist called into bands?
No,
or are there other examples too?
And I don't know about getting too specific, but there's always that awkward moment where I've been in situations where the artist is recording a song that they can't stand, that the label's making them record, or that the artist and the producer are completely at different ends of the spectrum of what they want. And then all the general session stories about late nights and drugs and whatever, that all has happened a time or two, just because I've been doing it a really long time. But in general, in Nashville, on the sessions that I've been on, it's a bunch of pros doing a really good job. And if something's a little bit off, everybody just kind of pulls together to make it through. And a little bit off could be terrible songs, terrible cue mix, clueless producer, Pro Tools crashing every 5 minutes, a terrible musician, acoustic guitar player that rushes horribly. The artist brought
guitar players never rush the beat.
Their brother-in-law is playing drums because he was free, that kind of stuff. Singers that really rush or get lost, and you're supposed to follow the singer or follow the chart. All that kind of stuff, you could add up to be a quote unquote nightmare session. But at the end of the day, I mean, good grief, you're getting paid to play music with your friends. Yeah. And then you just kind of give each other a knowing glance, smile, maybe text, dude, this is rough, man. Who are you talking about? This is rough. And then you just keep moving and you laugh about it, call on the way home. And I've had a lot of debrief calls as we drive away.
I'll bet, because you don't get a chance to chat about it in the studio.
And you just kind of vent, and then you get home and it's like,
it's all good.
New day.
Well, maybe describe what a session is like to the rock stars. What might a typical session be like as a musician showing up? Like what's the beginning, middle, and end of it?
Yeah, I think there are lots of kinds of sessions, but
This is you getting called in as a session musician, for example.
Yeah. The sessions in Nashville running 10 to 1, 2 to 5, 6 to 9. So being on time is important. Starting on time is important for, I'm talking about not for a amongst friends indie record. I'm talking about corporate union sessions. Everybody usually has a lot of gear options, instrument options.
Is there, when that session begins at 10, does everybody walk in the room and then the engineers start slowly walking around, miking up the drum set?
No, this is the drummer has showed up at 8:30 or 9. The studio has been set up impeccably the night before by a team of interns. Everybody's headphone box works. There's appropriate power run. There's appropriate lighting. Coffee is fresh.
Plug and play.
Yeah.
So what might you expect to accomplish in that 3-hour recording window?
Demo session is a publisher is paying a group of musicians to record something that sounds like what the record might sound like. And you can do 5, 6, 7 songs in a 3-hour session. This is all you never get the music before. I mean, once a year.
These aren't your band songs.
No,
this is songs you've never heard before.
Once a year, somebody will send me material beforehand. And once every 3 or 4 years, I'm really glad they did, because maybe they'll say, hey, we're going to do this song and it's going to be piano. It's going to be just like the record. And then it's like Elton John or something. And it's like, oh, I might have to, learn this, Or like, we'll chart. We'll chart. And there's one that's a little bit different. I'll go, why don't you send me that one? Because I don't want to be taking up 20 minutes to figure out chord progressions.
Right. A little bit different means nobody on this end could figure out how to chart it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I just kind of get a heads up for, then, so it's number charts usually. Nashville number system, which if you talked about that on this podcast. A little bit,
but feel free to introduce us to it again.
Well, you can Google this, and there's a book that Chaz Williams wrote, Nashville number system, but it's basically in the key of C. 1 is C, 5 is G, 4 is F, 6 minor is the A minor. And we just generally go 4-bar phrases across. So it might be like 1141, 1511. And then the line, and then here's the chorus, 4165, 4165, 4165, 4155. And then the next line, turnaround. And so we look at charts so you can very quickly change keys. Guitar players can capo. And there's all kinds of little.
Has anybody done a song out of the Nashville area code yet?
615?
Yeah.
Just
over and over again.
Well, it'd be an interesting phrasing. It'd be 615611561.
There you go. Right, because you got to stick to that 4-bar phrasing.
Yeah.
Well, so what are some other often confused notations in there that people need to know about?
Well, I mean, for a push, something that comes in the end of the beat before, you could have a check mark, or you could have for a major 7, like not a C major 7. Like a C, E, G, B natural, not B flat.
Right.
It's like a triangle. Plus for augmented, there's
and if it's just a 7, that's a dominant 7.
Yep. And then a split bar, you can either split bar meaning 2 beats on 4, 2 beats on 5. You can either write a line under it, or you can put a slash between them, or put parentheses around it. But then some people put parentheses when it's a 2/4 bar. So everybody, there's a little
like a
thing,
bar.
And you don't split hairs about it. You just like, oh, so that person does it this way. Got it. And it's usually not too confusing. You listen, everybody has their piece of paper, and you mark your own stuff for your instrument or things that are unclear.
And how about if the bass line is different from the root note of the chord?
Then you put like if it's a C over G in the key of C, it'd be a 1/5. Looks like a fraction, 1/5. So the bottom one would be the bass. And sometimes you can write out notation. Sometimes people can read, sometimes they can't.
If you wanted the bass to walk, do a specific walk to the next bar, would you write that out as a 1/5?
I would probably say on a chart, I'd say bass lick and an asterisk, and then I would write on the bottom of the chart what the lick is if it's something that happened a lot, so it didn't mess with everybody else's chart.
Yeah.
Or I might even just say bass and tell the bass player, hey man, check this thing out. I try not to, if I'm writing the chart, to give too much information, because that's the beauty.
Then it's cluttered, right?
That's the beauty of the number chart is that it's so easy to you can glance at it and see 16 bars at a time and almost remember it because it's so organized and simple.
If you have a verse and then a chorus, and then you have a second verse and a second chorus, would you do repeat signs?
I do not do repeats. I don't
ever?
have columns ever. Because it's just one more thing to take your mind off the music.
Where you are, yeah.
So if it's a super long song, I might do a DS or a DC or repeats, but I try not to.
What's DS and DC?
DS, you go back to the sign, and then there's a little figure that you go back to here, and then DC is go to the top. Del Capo will go to the top.
Yeah. And just do it all again.
And then you can say like two coda, and that's all kind of music school stuff. And sometimes people get flustered with that, and I just read the chart down. Plus, I like to keep it open. If maybe the second time around, you don't split the bar the same way, or you don't do the alternate bass note. And then so you don't have to write a first time only, second time only, which again adds to confusion. So anything that to me that's going to be some way that somebody could get pulled out of their performance, lose track, make a take. Somebody makes a mistake. There's no way that's not going to affect me.
Right.
It's going to, And if I make a mistake, it's someone's ear is going to be pulled out of the moment. So I try to keep the charts neat, organized, and not complicated. No roadmaps.
Let's talk about that for a second. So making mistakes. As a, more of an amateur player tracking in the studio, power weekend with my band, there's that figuring it out. And then there's let's go for it. And it's like this big accomplishment that you make it to the end of the song sometimes. What tips do you have for the rock stars about really keeping your mind in the game, making sure that take you do is fresh and has the magic and doesn't have the mistakes or somehow isn't?
Well, I mean, to be clear, when you're asking me about being a session musician, this is a particular job and a skill set. And it's unrealistic to imagine that somebody who's not doing this on a regular basis is going to come in, read a number chart, be able to come up with a part, not make mistakes. In a way, demo sessions, I said 5 to 7 songs. They're harder than record sessions because you got to come up with more stuff quicker. Record sessions, maybe 2 songs in a 3-hour session, or 1 song. Maybe it's 1 song in a whole day. The pace changes. But as far as the mindset, it's tension and repose again to me. So when I'm not playing, I like distraction. I like to have a magazine, look at my phone, get out of my chair, start a conversation. Even in between takes, I'm getting out. I'm getting out of the zone, because when I get in, I'm all in. So it's like a 3-minute sprint where I'm so focused on that performance. And the reason that I can do that is because I'm not stressing between. I'm not taking the between time to practice my part and to look at my chart. It's like I'm chilling. It's my repose. And then my intention is like getting my head in the game. There's so many different ways of recording. If it's your band and you're making a record and you're spending 3 months doing it, just take your time, figure it out. If it's your band and you have 3 hours to record 10 songs, you just basically play down a set list, then you should rehearse. Yeah. I'm not a big fan of rehearsing before recording with session musicians, but if it's a band, I think that's a fantastic idea. Is to rehearse, have it all worked out so you're capturing a great performance. You only get a great performance if you're totally unconscious, just totally in the moment, or you're hanging out over the edge of a cliff, scared to death.
Right.
That can be great. Or if you're just so comfortable, relaxed, and confident that you just
can't screw it up.
As a pro, you just deliver it.
It's a funny thing when you talk about being in the moment. It's kind of like a meditation kind of thing where it's like, have you ever noticed that sometimes you're in the moment and you notice you're in the moment, but the moment you noticed it, you're no longer in the moment?
Yeah. Yep.
And it's like that thing just goes away.
But I think what you just said, be mindful about it. If you have a certain mindfulness about how your brain works, I mean, I'm a kind of guy that works for me. Maybe somebody else is. I'm like that as a songwriter. My wife is a songwriter. When we write together, she's like, let's stay focused. Let's stay focused. And I'm the guy who will get the line by getting up and going to the bathroom, or going back and making a tea, or walking around the block, or taking a phone call, or looking at something online. I can, it's always the refreshing,
right.
And somebody else. So I think you have to also be respectful to the people around you. If you're working with somebody who like, let's do it again. I'm in the space, and you're like, man, I got it, or I need to relax. You have to read the room and be a team player. I think if you're recording at home, you should do whatever gets the best music. But if you're a nervous wreck and trying to be perfect, it's probably not going to feel great.
That's an interesting reminder, though, that you bring up about playing with other musicians and going for the take, is that the take may be an average median of all of your approaches. So if you nailed it on your first pass, like, you may not get to keep that one. You might have to nail it on or get as close as you can on your second, and that's where the final take's going to be.
So
right?
I had some of the older musicians, guys that were, when I started doing sessions, I was pretty young, and some of the older guys would talk to me about pace. Or like this, hey man, this drummer is a first take kind of guy. He's likely going to throw it on his drumsticks and walk away. So get your head in the game early. Or if it's this producer likes to do 25 takes, don't peak too soon. Just try stuff, relax, or it's going to break your heart that number 3 was the one.
Yeah.
So I try to get a feel for, I'll ask people, hey, so what are we doing today? Oh man, I want to get a few songs in the morning, or like, I just want to get 2 songs today. Great. And then, so what time do you think we'll be done? I don't know, 10 o'clock tonight or something. I think, well, we got 12 hours to do 2 songs. That means I can explore some options. That means that I don't need to get panicked. But if they say, man, my publisher's going to kill me if I don't get 6 songs today, then I think, okay, great. I'm going to play it safe. I'm not going to go for stuff that I don't know I can execute. And I'm probably not going to give them ideas that are risky. Because I play it and then they say, man, great take, everybody. Tim, I'm not so sure about the part. It's just a little whatever.
Now everybody's got to play it again too.
Well, even if they don't, I do.
Right.
So that's 3 minutes.
Yeah.
And maybe what I'm doing, assuming that I do a take and I don't have to fix anything, it's 3 minutes.
So let's talk about that. And ironically, the question is about talking about it. What do you want to say about talking about music in the studio versus just going out and doing it again?
Well, I think it goes back to being respectful of other people's needs. If I'm the producer, I try to talk about it not as in non-specific ways, right? Like I wouldn't say, hey man, I want you to play a part like Born to Run, the way they do the thing, or I want you to play solo like, whatever song, Last Dance with Mary Jane. I would just say, hey, I want you to play like you're on Saturday Night Live for the first time in your band, and all your friends from high school are home watching you. So that's not telling them apart. It's telling them, it's like a movie director, or, hey man, I want you to play like you've never turned on pop radio. Or I want you to play like your spoon roll and you've got an ashtray on top of the Wurlitzer, and you're totally fried out on doing this work and you don't care, and you're playing with one hand, and like that kind of stuff. Now play like you're wearing a suit in London in 1967. Now play like you're, imagine that how you'd play if you were barefoot and we were down in Cancun, or it's creating scenarios.
Yeah.
Or I play a demo and I go, I like the way this demo makes me feel. I'm not convinced of all the parts. Or, guys, this is exactly what we're doing today. The client is in love with the demo, doesn't own the master. We have to recreate this. So don't get creative, get scientific, listen to your part, learn it quickly, execute it. We got work to do. So it's setting the stage.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a great tip. And I remember hearing you talk about that before. And I love the movie director analogy, the storytellingness of it.
Now, sometimes there's an artist who has to talk and talk and talk and talk about his song, and that's developing trust. So if I go, excuse me, that's enough. No more words, please. Well, I've just shut down the artist. So I'm also looking at faces, and if people are starting to get a little shifty, I have to be respectful of that, and say, man, maybe we should just go play this. So as a producer, I'm trying to figure out what's going to get us to where we need to go quickly. As a musician, sometimes it's helpful to just be very specific, for somebody to say how you voice in that chord, and they'll exactly like this. What's the rhythm? Great. I'll just write it down. I'm getting very specific. If somebody says, that sound, that lead sound from the Cars song. Oh, great. Let's hear it. Thank you for using your words. Thank you for referencing something. I'll take it. But when you start a song and someone says, okay, I want you to play eights on the bass. You're going to play this beat. Tim, you're going to go up high and play eights up in the right hand. No left hand ever at all. And then you're going to, and then I'm just kind of like, oh, you just took all the fun out of this. And everyone's going to play so miserable,
Yeah.
So
it's too much direction. Then people won't want to try anything else.
But then one of the most genius songwriter, arranger, producers, Brian Wilson, did that. He brought in everybody and he said, "Here's is your part." And
what was everybody's takeaway after playing for Brian Wilson? Did they all
leave
leave going like, man, that sucked?
I think most of them, and because I know some of the people who did that, and I think, Jim Horn and stuff, talked to him about this, and I think they would hear it back in the control room, or they'd hear the record and say, man, this guy knows what he's talking about.
Yeah, it's cool stuff.
And the only thing that if he could have written it out, he would have. He just didn't do notation.
Let me ask you another question about being mindful as a musician out there. You're talking about being in the zone. You're in it to win it. You don't want any distractions. Talk to the rock stars about some of the common mistakes that the engineer on the other end of the talkback or in the control room might make that disrupts you. And you're like,
okay, what's super disrupting is when you say, man, that was amazing. Let's hear it. And then the engineer says, oh, I didn't know you wanted to record that.
Oh, the joke?
No,
dumb joke, or they actually
didn't.
do that?
I thought you guys were just running it. I mean, even if it's tape, you can always
say good, because I do the dumb joke version.
Well, the dumb joke version is that's fun. But when you got to be kidding me, you literally did not record that. Well, I didn't know. That to me is mind-boggling that anybody would not just press record, especially in digital recording. To have a great take, and the engineers say, guys, we have to do it again. I didn't get it a hot enough level on the kick drum. I just think we got to get our priorities straight here. Is it about the performance, or is it about the level on the kick drum? If the kick drum mic wasn't on, that still was a good take. We'll figure it out somehow. We'll drop in a sample and line it up frame by frame. I mean, we're going to do this. But for somehow the performance has been made invalid because we're missing something on the engineering end. I just don't buy that. I don't buy that. I buy a collaborative thing that somebody might say, man, did you just do some more compression on the piano? And you go, yeah, you printing that? Yeah. Man, I might play my part a little differently. That kind of helped me out. And it's printing mono, right? Yeah. Okay, let me just do it a little differently. You know? So if that's collaborative, or if a musician says, hey, can you just brighten up my tone a little bit in headphones? That's collaborative. But for the engineer to somehow think that the audio trumps the music, in my book, is...
You had to bring Trump up on the podcast.
In my book is a huge mistake, you know?
But, you did mention headphones, and I wanted to ask you about that.
Okay, here's another mistake, not listening, not putting the headphones on.
Yeah, I was going to say, as a musician, talk about the engineer's responsibility with headphones, but also talk about your takes on just a stereo mix versus, the make your own mix kind of stuff.
Well, sometimes you don't have a choice. If you don't have the setup to provide people with individual mixes, then the answer's there for you. If it sounds terrible and people don't know how to use it, you'd be better off giving them a 2 mix. But when the engineer hears something like, man, something's funny in the phones, and then the engineer says, yeah, well, what do you need? I don't know, like the drums, there's just no immediacy to the drums. You want the kick drum and snare drum louder? Maybe so. And then a song later, a different musician says, man, I'm just having a hard time feeling the kick. You go, you want more kick? I don't know, I guess it seems like. And then you go through this for 20 minutes or a whole session. And the engineers never put on the headphones to realize there's a major phase issue.
Right. Something's totally out of whack.
Yeah. And even experienced musicians might not. Now, I would just say there's a phase issue on the drums. But some musicians don't hear that or know that or won't say it.
Yeah.
They're being too nice.
Yeah, maybe it's the first time in that studio too.
Yeah. So I think for an engineer to start trying to fix a headphone mix without the easiest way to figure it out is put the headphones on.
Yeah, it just so happens that as engineers, we spend an awful lot of time getting to know what we think about the sound of stuff in headphones and speakers, and the quickest route to getting an answer is put some headphones on.
And the other thing to remember is sometimes I've gone out and put headphones on, like if I've gone back in. And listen, like say as a producer or whatever, gone back and listened to my headphone, my mix, or say in a tracking session. We've been working in the control room for a while, and then I go back out to my station and put on my phones. I can't believe how different my mix is. So the point is, if it's a 2 mix, understand that you're not necessarily trying to make it sound like a record. You're trying to give the musicians the information they need to play with feeling and execute well.
And I was going to qualify that and say, since you've played a lot of different instruments, have you noticed that what you need in the headphones is different sometimes depending on what instrument it is?
Kind of. I also feel like the feel and I use a lot of different headphone levels, and sometimes if I'm struggling with pocket, I just can't lock it in. Then I'm often listening too soft or too loud. So I'll try both. And then I mess with the pan position of the click. Sometimes I'll put it off to one side or another, and the level of the click, and sometimes the EQ of the click, or no click. I'll just kind of experiment. And then I try to save my ears if I'm doing parts that don't require. I got my sound worked out. Everything's fine. I'm playing a pad with 2 fingers the whole time. I'll save my ears, turn way down.
Yeah. I like doing headphones real low out there when I can get away with it, depending on what the part is. When I can get away, because I know there's going to be something where it's going to be piano-driven rock kind of thing, and I'm going to have to crank it. The other thing I think engineers will do is, they'll get a really cool sound, like some, mic we've never heard of through a bunch of stomp boxes, and it sounds really cool, but it doesn't help the musicians. And or even like the level of the room mics,
It might be an amazing room and all that. That's really cool. But I'm having a hard time because of maybe the slight delay on with the room, coming together with the sound. I'm having a hard time finding where that beat is, So I think it's maybe, don't the engineers that are showing off their interesting sounds to the band or to the client. And that's not the time to do it because it's hurting the music.
Right. And it's easier to show off the interesting sound in the overdub stage when the musician's maybe in the control room with you, hearing it out of the speakers, just like you are, I think. But yeah, it's funny how different the mix needs to be. I've done overdubs where, especially on acoustic guitar, for some reason, I always feel like the acoustic to feel it, it needs to be louder than expected. And, I might do something and then come in and listen, all excited to come in and listen on the speakers. I'm like, oh my God, that sounds horrible. Sounds like a big, dark, boomy mess. You know?
Acoustics are tough. Bottoming on acoustic.
Yeah.
It can be, I like over at Blackbird, they've got those little Mackie stations, and I'll EQ, I'll roll off stuff on the acoustic guitar to clear stuff up and really dial in a mix.
You want to talk about some of your favorite, more me headphone mixer boxes? I know there's a handful out there.
Well, I think part of it depends on if there's enough, if on the amp, if you got enough level. But over at Blackbird, they have those Mackie things in a cart. You know what I'm talking about?
So it's actually a Mackie mixer.
It's a Mackie mixer, and they have a what's the famous amp thing with it's
like a
dark tan
or Crown or something.
Crown. They have Crown amps, and they really you don't plug into the mixer, you plug into the headphone amp. There's a separate thing. It's really punchy.
But clear too.
Yeah, and so then Ocean Way has those custom ones that look like the old Mo West things with those knobs. They're homemade things. Those are really good. I'm not a huge fan of most of the little boxes.
The prosumer things.
I hate to say it, but the one that has the limiter on it, and I've never loved those. I was like, just give me a feed off of.
Well, that's good to hear. I mean, I don't think we need to name drop, but it's good to get that feedback from you that it's inspiring to use, one of these common headphone mixers, and then maybe just having a real good mix to begin with.
And my place, I give the most of the time, I've got the same mixes. The other thing I think is not realizing, I think an engineer can intuitively know what a musician might need. So I'm always thinking, if I was this guy, what would I want to hear?
Yeah. Well, for me, it's the first one I had to learn was the drummer needs a lot of click in their headphones.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you send that on a separate fader.
And like, say if it's say a guitar player is doubling another part. Well, I can take out all the rhythm acoustics. I can take out the piano. I can take out everything. I could have no overheads. I could have kick, snare, hat, drums, and the other guitar because we know the task, right? We've already decided to do this. So we don't need to hear anything else. And the engineer doesn't, in my opinion, or a guy that's working for me, doesn't need to say, hey, Tim, should I give this kind of mix? The engineer, if the engineer knows the acoustic guitar is rushing, the engineer can reach over and pull that down a little bit if the singer is starting to rush.
Yeah.
Or tap it back in Pro Tools. Like, I think there are certain things an engineer can do without announcing it to just make things.
Like maybe the band doesn't need to hear the vocals that are way out of time quite so loudly in the headphones.
Yes. You don't have to say, hey guys, you don't have to wait till somebody says, can we get a little less vocal? We all know they want a little bit less vocal. Those are tough situations if you're sharing a mix with a singer.
Yeah,
then I think you have to tell the singer that, look, you have to take one ear off. That can be rough.
Yeah, like a lot of singers, in studios like mine or other sort of medium, small home studio-ish situations or whatever, are. Probably there's a lot of discussion about, well, yeah, let's go ahead and get like a great tracking vocal because you never know if we're going to use it. But so often it's it's really difficult to actually be able to use it.
And yeah, unless you have good isolation and you got a good sound.
Or no isolation at all, and you're right out there just living it.
Yeah. The other thing I was going to say about engineers and headphones is check latency. Do it yourself. I can't tell you how many times I've gone, like I've had a singer singing a harmony part, and then I go out to play a part, and I pick up a guitar, and it's like, chicky. And I'm like, whoa. And I realized that the singer was singing with and somehow never noticed or didn't say. I mean, I'm spoiled, playing hundreds and hundreds of thousands of hours with great headphone mixes, with great headphones coming off of, a punchy API desk or something like that. So I'm pretty sensitive to latency. Really, really throws me.
Yeah.
Latency does. And there's not always an easy way around it. I'll start freezing tracks like crazy to just lower any of that possibility.
Well, it can even sneak up on me with this HDX system, which, like my old Pro Tools TDM system, latency should be a non-thing. It should be, this is the pro rig. You don't ever have to think about it.
But it is.
But if you stick something on the master fader by accident, you'll get delays.
So keeping stuff off the master fader and for sure. Yeah.
All right, cool. So let's see. What have we not talked about that we should keep talking about? Writing songs. Here's a good question for you. What do you feel like, as a producer, you're working with an artist on their song. As a songwriter, you're co-writing or you're just working on your own songs. What do you feel like are some common mistakes people make writing songs?
Making them too long. Overestimating the interest and patience level of their listener.
What's too long? 3 minutes and 31 seconds?
Too long could be a minute 20. It could be 6. It's like not being able to gauge, being so in love with the own material that you lose the perspective of what other people might think. A hook isn't bad, like, can somebody walk away and if you tell you what the name of the song was? If they're trying to remember it 2 or 3 days later and they're like, it's the song that started with the auto harp, that's not a good sign. You want them to be able to say the title of the song or sing. We love something we can hang our hats on and remember. I think it's forgetting who the audience is writing for. Look, if you're a singer-songwriter, your A&R person is yourself. Your record company is yourself. Your management is you. Now it's up to you to kind of think about how much you want to think about your audience, but your audience. You can look out at the house concert or at the gig or at the arena or whatever, and you know what people like and what they respond to. If you are writing for, today I was working on an ad, and it was a true jingle in the old school. I've done a lot of ads and very few jingles, meaning that the company's name is actually in the thing. This is very old school.
Ad is name and thing. Jingle is not name and thing.
No, a jingle would be like, Nationwide is on your side. Like right. You say the product in the thing. And working on an ad brief might be post score, writing a song about love and togetherness that doesn't talk about Coca-Cola, so that's just writing to a brief, but not talking about not name checking the product. So, but today I'm working on a thing that is very much that. And so I just keep looking back at the brief. It can't, it's genre free. It's a little bit country. It's a little bit rock. My parents have to be able to understand it, like it. My kids have to be able to understand and like it. Black people, white people, young people, old people, rich people, poor. It's like, so it's very much that. It's very genre free. It's very watered down. They have 30 catchphrases about their product. They don't sing well. They don't sound good. They're not worded well, but that's what they came up with. So I'm not making high art. I'm just trying to get the brief. If I don't want to follow the directions, I should say I'm not into that. It hurts my heart too much to do it. But it would hurt my heart to do it every day, but I don't do it every day. but I'll take this brief, you know?
It sounds to me like it's kind of sounds like a fun puzzle to figure out too. You know?
It is to me. So my thing is like, if they gave us 30 catchphrases, how many can we possibly use to blow their minds? You know, and if they say, you know, up and fun, it has to be up and fun. I'm not going to say, I don't think they really mean that. And, you know, it's a mid-tempo, but mid-tempo could be fun. Don't start, just follow the directions if you're in that line of work.
Okay, here's a question for you.
So that's the thing is knowing your audience. I mean, if you're writing a country song and you don't know what country radio sounds like and you want to pitch it, you better know they want a version of what's already there. Same with any commercial genre. And there are certain words you say and don't say, and certain topics that work great and some that don't, and certain grooves and certain tempos and feels and forms. And so it's thinking somehow that you are special and get to not stay in the lane that music is.
Right.
And if it frustrates you, you should either not do it because music should be fun, or you should not do it all the time. And then you can go, oh, this is kind of fun. I have to stay in this lane. Now, after 20 in a row, you're going to resent it. But for today, this is really fun that I have to stay in the lane. And then, thank goodness, tomorrow I'm in a different lane.
Yeah.
And then I stay in that one. So I don't resent the guardrails anymore. I did when I was younger, for sure.
When do you write music for yourself? When do you write for Tim Lauer? And when you do write for Tim Lauer, do you create your own guardrails?
The answer is I always do, because it's fun to do and it's my job, you know. But when do I ever write something just to fill my own creative? For better or worse, the answer is never. And the answer is also, this says a lot about my personality. My answer is also never have. I always have written something. No, that's not quite true. It's not true. When I had my publishing deal early on at Sony, I was very much writing songs that I liked. But I was still doing it in the context of business, of a publishing deal. And I very much would love to have seen them get recorded.
Right.
But I don't just, look, I love what I do, and I got so many things that I can do, and I have way more work than I can do. So and I work a lot. So I can't imagine that, there's a situation where I have a day where I don't have something I can get paid to do. For now, there'll be a time, but right now that's not the scenario. And I can't imagine there'll be a day that I would say, I'm just going to do this because I need to do this. There's always an end game. If I sat around and made interesting cues for my film scoring reel, I'm doing it for me, but I'm also doing it because I want to get a film scoring gig. So there's still this is my job. I like my job, but it can't be it's not my hobby too, because I don't really have hobbies because I like my job. That's a long answer?
No, it's good. I mean, I just thought of the question as I was asking it, but I mean, when you talk about writing film score music, maybe if it's not requested, maybe that's sort of an opportunity where you just, what do I feel like expressing right now? You just do it and you just make it, and then
But there's usually an end. Like if I say, I really want to do this sync project because I really want to explore like doing something real synthy. Okay, because I have this band BN, and it's sort of like synth dream pop, It's fun to program all this stuff and get out synths and everything.
What's the band?
It's called BN, BIEN.
Okay.
And it's fun. My wife and the singer write it. I produce it, mix it, play most of the instruments. It's a lot of fun. But when we do it, we also want to get an ad, and we want to get a license, and and we do sometimes.
Yeah.
So I will always make decisions that help with the possibility that this music a lot of people will like or want to use more or buy or pay for,
Yeah.
because then I get to do more of it.
Now, what about lyrics? Is lyric writing something that is part of your process as well?
Yeah, very much. When I was at BMG and I was not getting any country cuts, and they sent me to London and Stockholm and Berlin and a bunch of places, and I started writing for other markets, and that worked well. But I did all the lyrics for that, and I like writing lyrics a lot. And it doesn't seem that weird or much different. It's sort of from the same place.
Is that writing? Would an example of that be sort of writing on assignment? Like, we need a song about this, or is it just like whatever you feel like?
Or writing with an artist that I'm producing. My producing stuff tends to be more, Indian songwriter kind of thing. And sometimes, and I know I'm not going to make any money off the cut, but it's fun to have another level of input into the material.
We talked about working with or knowing Lauren Francis together.
Yeah.
Great musician and writer and singer himself.
And sometimes you do write with the person because you feel like, man, we're making a 5-song EP and you don't have any up tempos. And when you go off by yourself, you just get sad and write ballads. But this is a really ballad heavy EP. So then maybe I just said, let's write something together. And then I can steer the process to fill a specific hole. But then that's still me. I mean, I'm not doing it from a purely self-expression kind of
right.
thing.
So I guess that's what I was imagining. It was a question to ask whether, is there a room for, and is there a balance between lyrically self-expressing versus, writing as more of a craft and figuring out what's needed for a particular song?
Because, we're all people. And so there's a lot of commonality in like the human experience, and I can kind of draw on something, and maybe I'm trying to like get into certain, like if I was telling somebody play like you're on Saturday Night Live for the first time, and then you imagine what that would feel like. And then you think, imagine you're 20 and your fiance just broke up with you. Well, then maybe there's a place where you can like imagine how that might feel, and then use some of your own words or whatever books you were reading or quotes you liked or movies. And you start to bring in that, and that's from a personal place. And sometimes you can further your own little observations on how relationships in life work. And sometimes it's fun to kind of put yourself into a character's spot, And I did some of this for the Nashville TV show where you've got a script and you think, okay, so this is the person singing the song. There's a spot in the script that says so-and-so sings a song, at a show, and it's about feeling empowered and confident, and I'm going to take over the world. And then so it's like, okay, so I know the character. I also know the singer's voice, what they're capable of, and when they sound their best. I know the emotion that the director and the writer want, the showrunner. I know how long it's going to play. I know what the lyric content is. I know the range of my singer. I made an extra call to the showrunner to just riff, just talk. And I just wrote all these phrases down and all these things. And then so I think, you know what? I can make them really happy and just put on my ego-free. It's not emotion-free, but it's not, they're not my emotions. I'm aware of the emotional component, but I'm not operating from my emotional point of view. I'm operating from the emotion that somebody else has picked for the occasion.
Yeah.
So I'm pretty. I've done a lot of it, a lot of writing to brief, and yeah.
So I was going to say, just thinking about it, I mean, you actually get to sort of like cross gender, right? I mean, you're writing as a woman, you're writing as a guy, as a kid.
Yeah, I wrote it. One of my favorite songs was a song that Lennon and Maisie, the two kids in Nashville, did. They sang as a duet. So here's these two young girls, not even 20 years old yet, and singing about, their life and their family, and then so I wrote it in a way that would feel like something they would have written already on the show, not the actual girls, the characters, so there's several layers removed, and it also is very, very moving to me, and I feel a connection, personal connection to it, even though it was written on assignment for a specific scene for specific actors.
Okay, so give us some tips on finding an artist's range. I've experienced that before. As an engineer, producer, I've sat in the control room and said, well, here's an obvious harmony, and I sing it, and then she goes to sing, and I'm like, oh, that
doesn't sound.
It sounds like an octave off or something.
Yeah.
What do we need to know about learning somebody's range and writing for that?
Okay, for instance, on the show, I would often, more than half the time, I was picking the keys, which was the most terrifying thing. Picking a key, because a half step either way can be huge.
Right, and you're done booking a 16-piece orchestra.
Yeah.
By the time they come sing on it, to find out it's in the wrong key.
Right. So what I did is I would go back and listen to recordings, the most recent ones, because people's voice change and whatever. And I would just try to get a really good feel. I'd poke around on the piano and they say, oh, that's the break. That's the angst thing. Man, they could really belt this. And I would just, every time I would go back and listen and listen to where their voice hit a sweet spot for that song. And I think, okay, there's the same kind of feeling I want to get on this song. And so if that word would land here, that's the sweet spot. And then I got to go through their lowest and highest to see now if that's the sweet spot, am I going to get it out of their range? Or that's with somebody who doesn't have the time to show up to get a key.
Right. But they've also recorded previously, so you can go listen to their stuff.
A lot of times people will come in and, if you're recording with them, like, this is the key I do it in. And it's like, man, what if we could try? And then you just get the capo going. Or if it's in E and they're playing it out of E and they can't play the chords in another key, I'm, as a musician, I'm able to just like, come to the piano, or I'll get a guitar and I'll play. You just sing. And what key is it? Don't worry about it. And then I try to get them, go high, go low, get them totally lost on what key it is. And they keep asking, it was lower or higher? I'm like, great, you don't know. So perfect. Just get them completely distracted and out of balance. And then I to go is the lowest possible key they can sing the song in. I learned this from Peter Collins. And then the highest possible key. Like, not like, man, it's a little better, half step up. You go till they literally cannot pull it off.
Yeah.
See what it sounds like. And then you go all the way down. And then take a little time. It's so worth it to just find, maybe you want some angst. So it's about a half step too high, but I'm really struggling for it. Like Don Henley vocal or something like that. He's always pushing as high as,
Yeah.
Or you could go for a super relaxed thing, or you could get it whispery down low. So I think it's tough with a band because now everyone's got to adjust and they can't always. So this is an early on thing of talking through before, pre-production. Don't do it in the studio, or it's a big nightmare. And then the singer is going to worry. They're going to say, that doesn't sound like me. Well, it's because it's the first time they sang in that key and they're still not used to it. They've done it 200 times in concerts. So you have to again gauge how quickly are they on this train. And then if they're just like, I just don't like singing it that low, and you realize they're trying to win American Idol in their brain and they're just never going to like it, they're always going to be resentful towards you. That the lower key is better. Know it. And so does everybody else. But it's not your record. And the artist wants to sing it up there.
I love that reference, man. They're just trying to win American Idol in their brain.
Yeah. And then so you say they're not confident enough in the material, that they feel like their voice is more important than the material, which it isn't. But you have to roll with that because you don't want to, you don't want them to be resentful, and it's a business move too, where and it's a confidence and psychological thing. So you just try, you see how much you can push it. Same with tempo.
Yeah, I was going to say, how do you determine the right tempo for the song?
The thing I don't like to do with, writers, like I do it at 111. You go, okay, take it up a little bit. What is it, 112? Let's just play. Are we back at 111 now? Just play. And then like, why don't you come in here with a guitar? And then I have that app live BPM.
Oh, tell us about that. I was just about to ask
It's called
what's the most useful
live
BPM?
and you just you open it up and you hold it out, and it will tell you the tempo of the song, and it maps it too, so you can say that it went from 96 to 99, and
very cool. Great tip.
And you can kind of see, they started slow and worked up. You can kind of see what's happening. And then sometimes if I think, well, that really worked great, then I'll tempo map the session, If I'm always seeing a little bit of a pullback to the beat before the chorus, great. If we're at 102, I'll make the beat before the chorus 106. And it doesn't take much time. It could get you into trouble later if you're flying something, but you make that call. And so I do flexible tempo things pretty regularly.
That's pretty cool. So you might have the verse in one tempo, but then as the last bar going into the chorus, it just ramps up slightly to the chorus.
Maybe the last chorus goes half a click faster, or
not extreme changes, but just enough to feel it.
Urgency. Yeah, or sometimes it goes from 102 to 108 and starts at the beginning and does it slowly to the end, and no one ever knows.
Yeah. Let's see what I want to ask you about. So also tempo wise, I find that getting to the part where there's a lot of lyrics is where you find out where the lyrics step on each other.
Which is what I was saying about guitar. Just take the band out. Let's just play it. Let's keep it simple and play it in here. And then when everyone starts going, man, that's it, then we'll see where we land. And then you have to gauge your singer. If they start freaking out, freaking out, you have to decide what you're going to, because sometimes people will say like, well, I think there's like tempo changes and then there's tempo zone changes. So they'll say like, you want a little faster? And like, no, I want it one tempo zone different. And so,
right.
So it might, like, I'm talking about changing.
Like it was mid tempo, but we need a fast version.
I'm talking about like changing the feel of it.
Totally.
I did that the other day. It was a song, a BN song that I'd written with the girls, and we were doing the vocals to like a real simple MIDI stuff, all in MIDI and track. And I just kept thinking, man, this was too slow. This is too slow. And after we did all these stacked vocals, we all agreed that it was too slow.
Hence the power of the acoustic guitar in the control room.
So and then I tried to do the time stretch thing, and it sounded terrible, and all the feel was gone.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, you know what? We're all grown-ups, and let's just start over. So we started over. Second time went much quicker, the new tempo. Then we went back and listened to the first tempo, and I took out the instruments, and we just click and vocal. And then I picked up acoustic guitar and I played a different rhythm. The same tempo, it's just different rhythm. And everyone was like, that works great. Well, so now it's about the parts. It's like, if you love that guitar part, we got to do it faster, because this guitar part doesn't work at this feel. I personally believe that this is a bold statement, that there's a correct tempo for every song. That there is the key that's like, man, who knows? The part, the drum pattern, but the tempo, I think, is sort of like there is a tempo that the song should be.
What makes you conclude that? Is it some experiences you had where
I don't know, I just feel it in my bones that there are certain grooves that have to be played at a certain tempo.
Grooves, I'm with you on.
Well, okay, groove song combinations. Like if you're married to these elements, then it is 88,
All right, dig it.
And then I say that, I'm sorry, I keep interrupting you.
It's all right. It's your show.
I say that, but then listen to Earth, Wind & Fire September. I mean, very riff and pattern oriented. And it starts and it speeds up so much by the end of the song. And it feels amazing every single second. And it's not on the grid and there's no click. And it's just awesome. So they went through a lot of different tempos and they were all great. So I'm contradicting myself, but in general, I think tempo is super, 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 super important.
Yeah. I definitely find that there are ones that feel right. And recently I just had to speed up a song that we cut that was a little too slow. And I did the elastic audio thing, and boy, am I on the fence about it. But I bounced it off a couple of people, and they like the new tempo better. So I'm like, maybe I should just let go of my,
Well, the elastic audio thing messes with the feel.
It messes with the feel. It also messes with the sound.
Oh, that's for absolute certain.
Yeah. Do you have any elastic audio tips for us? Just don't use it if you don't have to.
No, I would, if I can, I think I'd almost get a better result in this painstaking, but to just kind of start chopping stuff and,
just move the audio clips around.
Yeah.
Yeah. Especially if you're going to speed it up, it's a little more, it's easier to get everything closer together probably. But
listen to everything individually. Maybe it works for everything but bass. And maybe one song, it'll work. The bass works fine. But then the next song, it's like, if we just replace the acoustic, we'll be fine.
Right. Have you noticed sometimes when you edit music, as long as you can lay another couple of overdubs on top of it, it just clears it all
just
up.
one thing on there that's new and not time stretched, we'll be okay.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, let's jump to the jam session and the outro questions. And we'll start with the first one. When you started out in recording and music, what do you feel like was holding you back?
I think myself, generally it was an expectation that I was instantly going to sound like my favorite records. And so I was holding myself back by, I knew enough to know that my stuff didn't sound like that stuff. And it sounded terrible in comparison. And instead of going, all right, man, I got some work to do, I would sort of beat myself up.
How about some of the best advice you remember receiving?
Well, on the audio thing, I remember taking stuff to Richard Dodd, great engineer, mastering engineer. And he said, did you record a lot of this with the same mic and the same pre? And I said, yeah, all of it. And he goes, I can tell. And he said,
there goes my theory about, spending all your money on the one mic and one pre, huh?
Well, there were some frequency build-up things. And, so, now I try to, even if I'm stacking a bunch of background vocals, I'll go to the other mic, or I'll just halfway through, I'll swap out pre's, or,
It's a good tip.
Because you can really get some build-up. Yeah, I mean, I'll say another Richard Dodd thing. I took a EP to him once. He said, are you paying for this? And I said, yeah. And he said, I'm not going to master this for you. I'm not going to take your money. And I said, you're not going to take my money, or you're not going to master it? He goes, either. And I said, why? And he said, you have 5 great songs on this. Great tracks. Mixes are great. Singing is great. But you don't have the hit. And I don't mean a radio hit. You don't have the standout hit. This artist is too good for you not to have a song that catches people's attention and is the way in. So you should find that song first and then come back. And I thought, did he literally just turn down work and tell somebody he wasn't going to do it? But I realized it was such a gift. What he was saying is, you're at mastering. You're all the way to mastering. And what's your song? So it's always about the material.
It was like, you're not ready. You're not done yet.
You don't have that one thing that catches people's attention.
So riff on that for a second. When do you know that you've got the one thing so that you don't end up at mastering without it?
Well, I think I value other people's opinions. So I think other people telling you is good. And it maybe even like not music people, so I think it's okay. I like to share things in progress, get people's opinions. How do you know? I think you can be honest enough with yourself to I think you got to be pretty tough. You can always play stuff live. You can learn a lot about your material.
Yeah, I bet.
By just playing a song with an acoustic guitar.
Get your ass out on a stage and get
embarrassed.
embarrassed.
If you don't have a gig, Rodney Crowell told me you should be able to sing your song and look somebody you respect in the eye. And if there's one place where you feel like you got to shift your eye contact away, that's a line that you can't stand behind. You got to work.
Nice. Oh, that's a great tip, man.
Yeah. So I try to think, am I ready to send this to an engineer that I respect? Here's another tip, and something that I've got a little group of maybe 3, 4, 5 engineers that we send our mixes around to each other. And it's a great way to learn by listening to other people's mixes from hot off the press perspective. It's also an interesting thing to get honest feedback from people you respect. And so the information that you get from people, it's just so different. You know, somebody might say, if you dip a little 1K in the piano, then you won't have to turn the vocal up. You know, and then somebody else will say, feels like there's like 1 or 2 many parts on the bridge. You know, and somebody else will say, boy, I sure wish you had something that just opened up the energy on the last chorus. But it's amazing with like really super experienced, great engineers, how short the list will be. And I think that means that you understand that there's a lot of decisions already made. Like conceptually, like I can hear something and go, that's not my taste. That's not a concept I would have gone for. But they've obviously committed to that. Within the context of that commitment, what are the things that are making this less engaging to listen to, right? So, I mean, that's a tip would be find people you respect and send your music around before it's done. When people send me their CD and say, hey man, I just got this done, would you just comment on like the arranging and the mixes and the mastering? And I say, nah, you know, you already did it. What does it matter at this point? You know, I'll help you with your next one, but I don't want to get you freaked out that these mixes are too squashed or whatever.
There's no room for change at that point.
Just keep on moving.
It's also similar, you know, if you're producing and the artist is sending you their songs, I always feel like just strum a guitar, iPhone recording. I want the simplest. I just want to hear you playing this song so I know what that looks like.
What the song actually is. Yep.
Yeah. Sometimes that doesn't apply. Sometimes, you know, it's meant to be programmed electronica with some kind of, you know, auto-tune thing over the top. And so it wouldn't apply. But certainly in Nashville, you know, an instrument plus a voice is usually enough to bring the song across, right? Mm-hmm. How about sharing a recording tip or hack or secret sauce, something the rock stars could use on their next session today?
Oh, this is interesting. Before I came over here, I had an engineer working for me, and I was looking at these questions. And I said, Ross, you've been around me for a while. What do you think do I have any secret sauce? He goes, oh yeah. I go, what? And he goes, you play the dumbest, simplest parts. And I'm thinking, what is this going to do? And then you sit down and you treat it, and all of a sudden it's like the most exciting thing in the whole song. So I guess my secret sauce is that you can make a lot. This is very vague, but you can make a whole lot out of very little. I mean, you can take a cheap Casio keyboard and stick a mic on it and play with one finger and find some ways to make that really, really interesting.
Yeah. I would take that a step further and say that the more complicated or complex that musical part is that you're making, maybe the less room to treat it and really make it shine and bring it forward.
And I think in those situations that I was talking about, this other secret sauce is just guts to like push stuff.
Yeah.
Like, that's a lot of reverb. You know, it's a 20-second reverb, and there's 6 of them ganged up on there. And then to where now it becomes a big thing. Yeah. There's on this Foy Vance song called She Burns. I played a bunch of stuff on that song, and there's like a backdrop, like this ambient drape to the whole thing. And I took the Kemper, amp simulator, and there's like an infinite verb thing. It could be 40, 50 seconds long.
Awesome.
And I turned it to 100%. And I just had a synth, and I would just like fade up, no attack, like something super high. And I was also, I think before I was sending it to this real tube spring reverb and overdriving it. I did the input to where the springs are, so it had this little hair on it, and then did the Kemper, which is amping it again, plus the thing. And it's just this huge, long soundscapey thing. So it's the courage to use everything in the wrong way. I'm playing a marimba sample, half speed up 3 octaves, or you just do stuff all wrong, and the red light says you're overdriving it. Be careful. And I'm like, no, drive it more. And then real amps are cooler. And it's like, yeah, but this is stereo and we don't have a real amp right now. And somebody's the Kemper. And then like that reverb is like longer than the entire verse. Yeah, let's make it longer. Stick one on top, So it's kind of the courage to reimagine.
And it's remembering to take a little bit of time and effort to set up, the gear, so that now you've built an instrument that you can play. You have to give yourself that room for playfulness with it. Yeah. Or else you never even get there, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Just quickly, favorite hardware tool or something you're excited about now?
I mean, I just use an SM7 all the time.
Okay, good.
I hope it sounds as good as I think it does. It probably doesn't, but I use it all the time.
How would you describe why you like it?
I think if I had a C12, I just use my SM7 all the time. I like the immediacy. I like the EQ that it puts on it. I like that it just sticks me just right there. It's just right up in my face.
I feel like dynamic mics have sometimes have a graphic quality to them. You can see the sound a little bit more.
I like a 421 on a vocal. I like 421s on piano, even nice piano. They sounded great. I like putting a 57, lift the piano lid, and then stick the mic, the 57, as close to the not on the strings, but on the lid.
So it's like the lid becomes a boundary mic. With
exactly. And you 57. Put it as close as you possibly can without the vibrations hitting against it. And you can't believe how great that sounds.
That's awesome. Great tip. I have never tried that.
Also, you stick in a bullet mic or even a cheap mic, some kind of cheap mic, down in the holes of a grand piano. They have those little, stick it right down in there.
Yeah. I've done that with a 57, and when we send the piano to a Leslie, I'll put the 57 in the hole.
Yeah, that's nice.
Send it to the Leslie.
So hardware, yeah, I would say that mic. Also, I've got a Leslie. It's a pretty nice piece of hardware.
Leslie's pretty fun.
My Mellotron, I use the Mellotron all the time. Those are instruments.
Do you have a real Mellotron?
I have the new one. It's digital, cool. But it's real, and that it's the Mellotron. It's the full length samples. Full length recordings of all the samples, so it's 8 seconds worth. It's just like a huge hard drive of a good recording of the.
Right behind you in the distance is my box for the M-tron.
Yeah, well, which I have, and I like all that, and I have a lot of versions of that, and they all sound kind of like, oh, this is lo-fi and silly. The Mellotron is beautiful. It's very hi-fi. There's no warble wobble weird EQ.
Okay, so how about a favorite software tool or something you're excited about? You did bring up Soothe before we did this.
Well,
and what else for Bass Rider we were chatting about?
So for compression, I think Soothe is great if you just want to keep little problem areas like smooth bass, de-essing point that goes all over the place, harsh vocal, even a mix to just kind of give it a little gushier thing. I love the Double Octalux with the mix knob. And
the Sound Toys.
Yeah, we did a big shootout of SSL, like at Alan Smart, and then the one in the console, and then over at Blackbird. And we liked the console. I liked the console one better than all the others. And the closest we could get to that sound, we tried several other compressors, was the Devil Deluxe plugin. And so I went through their attack release kind of drive, all that stuff to kind of got it matched and saved a little Tim starting point.
Wait, does it have, does the Devil Lock have like a secret settings?
No, it's just, it's like, but you can mess with how much drive and how much it's compression drive, fast and slow release, and then a mix knob.
Sometimes I wish there was an input level to it because I feel like I'm always hitting it hard right off the bat.
Yeah. Oh, you mean like less input?
Yeah, like I'd back down my input. I'm probably just recording too hot.
Yeah. But I like that. And then I also like the Waves MV2. We used a lot in the Nashville show because it's got the upward.
Yeah. How do you describe the upward? I've played around with it, but I'm not sure if I know how to describe it.
If a compressor is looking for stuff that gets over a certain threshold, it taps it down. This is where when stuff's getting soft, it goes and finds it and pulls it up.
Right. So
it's
like
going to
brings
pull
the
up,
floor up a lot closer.
Yeah, it's going to pull up noise. It's going to pull all that stuff up. But on a vocal and where I don't want to make less dynamic range by pressing things down, it's like, get all that stuff, make it, come to daddy, which, by the way, it's interesting. I was doing vocals and I had an intern sitting next to me. I was doing vocal rides and he goes, "You're doing vocal levels 4 different ways." I said, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, you're doing your clip gaining, which is the same as the input to the compressor. The other way, so this was input to the compressor. Then there was just the fader after the compressor. Then I was EQing just like certain, like I would just EQ something, a word different to turn it up. And there was one more. But anyway, he said, "How do you know which one to do?" But if I wanted to, sometimes I wanted it to hit the compressor. I didn't like turning it up after the compressor. It's not the feeling I wanted. I wanted it into it. So I would clip gain and turn it up beforehand.
Yeah, clip gain is such a wonderful feature. I mean, I think that there were sort of advanced mixers that were doing that before we had clip gain, who would take the time to just actually use the gain plugin on everything, and really get the vocal leveled out before it even hits the compressor. But now it's sort of easy for us to try that if we've never tried it. It really is. You can just get a vocal to sit. Yeah,
and so for sitting, I like the Fab Filter stuff, like the MB multiband thing. I like their Saturn warmer upper. Right. I use Vintage Warmer ton.
Is that the PSP?
PSP, Vintage Warmer 2, Finalizer 3 setting, output on the master fader, and it never doesn't work. I mean, I say I don't do never, but it almost always works. And then I just do the mix knob.
Nice.
I've seen Richard master a whole thing only with Vintage Warmer.
Really?
I also saw him master a whole thing in Logic, just Logic EQs and compressors.
Nice.
He doesn't care.
Richard's awesome.
I also like the Waves, the J37 or whatever that was called, the tape thing.
Yep.
And I use their stomp boxes all, like, if I didn't have the Waves stomp boxes.
Oh, the guitar, what is it, Guitar 3?
Yeah, GT3 or something like that. I'd be very, very, very frustrated.
So you put those on a sound or
whatever. I'll put the overdrive on a vocal as a second track. I'll put I use that reverse delay all the time.
If you're going to do that, do you bus it over to a second aux track, or do you just duplicate the audio track and put the plug in on the second one?
I usually do duplicate, and usually. And I use those. I use it for effects a lot. They're, like I'll distort their spring reverb or the regular reverb. I'll put in time tremolo on their verbs and delays, and change the order of the pedals. Use it as a bass. Use that yellow distortion thing. Like, it kind of sounds like the Boss distortion box.
Nice. I have a yellow DOD pedal for distortion. I wonder if that's what they're modeling after too. Old school. Well, let's jump forward rather to our final question and get hypothetical here. We're going to take the Wayback Studio machine, and you get to go back in time, find young Tim Lauer, who's, just hitting the music store with your paper route money. And, you pull up in a car, roll the window down. He's like, "Who are you, freaky old man, pulling up?" No, what is this, 1970 something?
Yeah, not quite that long. 80s, let's say.
All right, 80s. Yeah. All right, 80s. And you say, "Well, I've come to give you this young paper route boy. I've come to give you this one bit of advice. Here's the single most important thing you need to know to be a rock star of the studio yourself one day." What advice would you go back and give yourself if you could?
It would absolutely be on understanding yourself and being able to read people. It would be learn what makes you tick sooner than later. Learn what your motivations are sooner than later. and get your head out of the manual and the practice room and start looking at other people and figure out what they need, what they're afraid of, what their priorities are at the moment.
Right on. Good tip.
I would say, and by the way, you're really going to wish you played guitar better.
Especially if you move to Nashville.
Because I work in, guitar genres. I like music that's folk music, rock music, country music, stuff that's made on guitars. And it would sure be nice if I could play more parts than I can play. And plus anybody can play keyboards now. I just hit quantize, parts aren't hard. So.
Well, I've heard you play keyboards, and that's not true. Not anybody can play like you can. So,
well, I play pretty simple a lot of the times.
That's hard to get to.
I think that's one of the reasons that I've gotten the whatever work I have is that a lot of times they got to tell keyboard players to quit playing so many notes. They're just like, well, at least if you call Tim, you have to tell him to play more. You're just playing whole notes over there,
Yeah, it doesn't. Not every song needs double bass octaves in the left hand with dominant sevens on every chord.
But sometimes you got to pull that out of the hat too,
or major sevens on every chord. All right, groovy, man. Thanks so much, Tim, for joining us on Recording Studio Rockstars. Let the rockstars know how they can find you online, learn more about you, follow you, and check out your music.
You can just look up my credits, and I think I can't remember my website name, but
yeah, well, I'll include links too in the show notes too.
I'm not big in the social media thing. I guess I post, but I like to watch other people.
You're busy taking a coffee break and doing another take.
Well, yeah.
Ain't got time for that. Cool, man. Well, thanks so much, dude. It's a pleasure hanging out with you.
It's fun. I feel like we could do it a few more hours.
Hey, we'll come back next year. Do another one.
Thanks for good questions.
I'm glad you liked them. Thank you. Yeah. You had some great stuff to talk about. I love getting into the writing and really like talking about the songs too. So I think that's a kind of a new and important direction for me and the podcast even.
Great.
Awesome, dude. Thanks so much.
Thank
Cheers.
you. Thank you. Hey, can I say something that you can
please
use
do.
now? So this is a big, East Nashville, you say Enneagram and everyone says, yeah, what number are you? I mean, it's sweeping the nation, but certainly Nashville. So the Enneagram to me has been the single most powerful thing in the studio and in co-writes recently is understanding from an engineer. I've cast engineers based on their Enneagram.
Wait, on their what?
Their Enneagram number.
I don't know.
So the Enneagram is a system. It's an old system. There's of nine types of people, right? And it's not a personality test because it's more about your motivations, why you do things, what's important to you. So you can look very different from the other person in the way you behave, but you're motivated by the same thing. You're afraid of the same thing, and you appreciate the same. So anyway, so my wife is a 4, and these two guys that have worked with me for the past couple of years are 4s, and the 4s are very emotional. They respond emotionally to things, and like to be very individualized and very unique and special. So, I've said to Owen, I said, look, this needs to be a recording that's very specific and very much representation of how this instrument sounds. And I know your first thing is there's an acoustic guitar. How can I make it sound worse? Which I understand. I do that often too, but that's not what the job is today. So you're going to be so miserable that I want you to keep your individuality and keep your spark. So you're not going to be on the session. But I've hired this person who's going to love this hi-fi capture type recording. And so I'm trying, the idea is that I want people to be, if they love what they're doing and feel like they're well cast, everyone's going to be happier. So,
well, I've been working in television and film. You know a lot about casting these days.
Exactly. And so if file management is really, really important and clean session delivery is really important, I'll get a 1 because they're perfectionists and that's just their thing. If this is a volatile situation between who's coming in to sing, and there are all kinds of reasons that there's going to be all kinds of anger and weirdness around, I might pick a 9, or somebody who's just a peacemaker and really sensitive to other points of view, can suss this thing out and help, So, if I'm doing a remote recording, I might get a 6, the worst case scenario thinker, who's going to have every possible adapter and cable we're going to need, because they've thought through scenarios that I haven't thought through, And so I'm a 3. I like to get a lot of stuff done, and get tasks, check stuff off the list,
So how do we find out more about
Use
this?
EnneagramInstitute.com. There's so much. I've got about 5 podcasts that I listen to.
How do we spell it?
ENNEAGRAM.
Okay, dig it.
So, if I'm with somebody who's a 2, who's a helper, I'm always going to say, hey, thanks for bringing that to me. I might even say, would you be willing to see if there's any coffee back there? I'm giving them an opportunity to do this thing they love, which is help. Now we got a thing going, you got to do your thing, which is helping. Cool. Maybe something that's important to me is like I just totally organized that and hung all the cables and did this, and I swept the bathroom, and I'm going, I like you. You help me get stuff done.
Yeah.
If you got an artist who's a 7 and they're always looking for stimulation, get a video game going, take a break, get outside, keep it fun,
And how do we find out what number all these people
There's
are?
all kinds of tests, and you could take a test online if it's for free tests and all that stuff.
Listen, man, I really want to do a podcast interview with you today, Tim, but before you come over, can you please just follow this link and go take this test and tell me your number?
I've done this with new guys coming into work, and it's like, this is really good to know, because then I know what's important to them and what they're afraid of, and if they're a 5 and they don't want me to change the plans on them. No, we had a plan, the other thing is for self-protection in this crazy industry, you can start to understand, what are some of the your own trigger points. And
it's good to know your trigger points.
Yeah.
Because they're out there waiting for you.
Yeah. I mean, I was having an interview with an artist to potentially produce, and she was known enough that I just Googled her name, Enneagram type, and about 6 different sites came up and said that she was a 1. And I thought, oh, okay, everybody agrees that she's a 1. So, 1 has a hard time as a perfectionist. Also can be a reformer and has a really hard time being playful. So I thought, okay, so I'm going to test some scenarios in this phone call to see how receptive this person is to joy and play in the studio. Because I want to see, this is what heals them, even though they resist this.
Right.
So how, what is this person's thing that could potentially bog down and derail this recording?
Well, that's cool, man. That's a great tip. I didn't know anything about that.
The 8 doesn't like to be controlled, So if I had an 8 artist or an 8 engineer, I would want to give them a wide swath to be themselves, create situations that they had freedom of choice, because there's going to be something where I'm probably going to have to put my foot down, but I'm going to save that by providing a lot of freedom for them to not be controlled. That includes where they sit, what song we do next, what mic might be chosen, So I'm thinking about all that the time through the Enneagram lens.
Enneagram.
Yeah.
Well, anyway.
Nice.
Thank you so much, dude. That's awesome. Rockstars.
That's the name of your Enneagram podcast.
Anyway. Yeah. Dig it. Well, Rockstars, a reminder that I'll have links to what we're talking about here with Tim in the show notes. So click through and check it out on your phone, or go to rsrockstars.com. And I will see you guys next time. Tim, thanks so much, man.
Thank you for having me.
All right, dude. Cheers. Thanks so much for listening to Recording Studio Rockstars. If you enjoyed the show and want to help make it better, please leave a rating and review on iTunes to help reach more people. You can click directly over to iTunes or go to recordingstudiorockstars.com/review for an easy explanation. And if you want more free content, all you have to do is text RS Rockstars to 33444. Again, that's RS Rockstars to 33444, and I'll keep you in the loop with articles, videos, and podcast updates. And I'll let you know about any upcoming giveaway offers, all totally free. Thanks for listening. I'm Lid Shaw, and this is Recording Studio Rockstars. Now, go make great music.